Who takes the first quarterback rep tomorrow in the team drills?
Drew Lock.
All right. And how will you set that up throughout camp? Will it be back guys with the ones the whole day?
Well, in the final analysis, we got these first 4 days, and it will be just like you guys witnessed in mini camp. You weren't here for OTAs, but everything was 50-50. What group they worked with, who started how many drills, etc. So after 4 days, I know a lot of you will be keeping your own little charts up there. It'll be 50-50. Unless it's an odd number, then somebody's got one more. And then we'll take a look at it after the first off day. And maybe we might do a day where one of them gets 70% and the other gets 30%, and then flip it the next day. But I think when you look at up until the point where we make a decision, it's going to be a 50-50 thing, both from a rep standpoint and working with what group. Now, one thing I will caution you to is what group, we may be changing in and out wide receivers per play, so you may look out there and what you view as the first team wide receivers aren't there, but the first team line is, how do you view that or vice versa? So the other positions aren't going to be dialed in always with who the quarterback is.
Do you intend to give each one a preseason game start before making this?
Probably. We haven't decided anything, but probably.
Thanks.
Hey, Vic, Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, Cortland Sutton, those type of guys, how do you plan to manage them during camp, and do they need preseason action to be ready for the season?
We'll manage them. Obviously, they're all in different stages. I think Von's ready to go, and we're just going to manage him just because of his age. I'm going to occasionally give him a day or two off here and there. Bradley, coming off his injury, he's not in great shape yet because, with it being an ankle, he missed a lot of workout time in the offseason up until even today. So his will be shorter starting out just because of a conditioning standpoint. And then Cortland's really ready to go, but we're going to monitor him. He had an ACL, unfortunately for us last year. Fortunately for us this year, the injury was early last year. So from a time standpoint, he's ready to go. He's had a tremendous rehab, but we're going to manage him.
Hey, Vic, ideally, when would you like to know who your starting quarterback is? Is it, as quick as possible to kind of get everybody behind the alpha on the team, or what's your philosophy on that?
Well, ideally, you'd like to come to that decision sooner rather than later. But we're going to let the decision be made for us, hopefully. And if it's and whenever that happens, it happens. If it's so close that we can't make a call, and it stretches into the first week of preparation, then I'll probably be playing games with you all week. That first game week, as to who the starter is. But we're like everybody else. We want it to define itself quickly, sooner rather than later, but we're going to let the process play itself out.
Hey, Vic, you were pretty quick to answer Drew Lock is going to get the first snap. Was this much of a discussion, honestly?
No.
And why him?
He was here. He's been here. He's got more seniority with the Broncos, I guess. It was really no big deal.
We talked to Coach about September's been an issue. You haven't wanted September. Do you change anything in this camp? Because your first camp was physical, longer practices. Last year was a mess for not you, but everyone. Have you have an idea of how this camp's going to look?
Well, there's been enough changes because of the new CBA, which came into effect last year, but then you had all the COVID stuff that filtered into that. So last year would be something hard to compare it to. But, so for instance, the first two practices can only be 2 hours in length, just helmets. The next three can only be in, we call them shells, the miniature shoulder pads. And there's a time limit. And then you don't have full pads on until the sixth practice. That's in the CBA. So that's an adjustment in and of itself. Practices used to be you could stay out there up to 3 hours. And as you're referring to in 19, we stayed out there for 240 to 245 sometimes. Now it's only 2.5 is the max. So I think there's changes, but a lot of them are mandated changes, not so much me changing. But we need a lot of reps, obviously. And we have a young team still. We have a quarterback competition going on. So the more reps we can get, the merrier. And then the numbers affect that. Last year, I had planned on practicing the same length, but right off the bat, the rosters were 80 instead of 90. We had early injuries, some serious, some not so serious, but, there was days we're walking out to the practice field with 65 guys, not 80. So it's hard to go 2.5 or 2.5 plus then, so you always have to adapt on the run. So there will be changes. Some of them are mandated. Some of them will be tweaks here and there by us.
Coach, could you, the decision on quarterback is obviously difficult, but once, I'm right here. Sorry. Once you make that decision, though, do you view that as a permanent decision, or do you think it could stay fluid, like the Dolphins did last year, where it just wasn't working out for one guy, so they went to somebody else, but they went back to that guy, that it could float like that during the season? Or once you guys make that decision, no, that's it. That's what we're sticking with.
Yeah, the Dolphins situation, I think, was different than most quarterback-type deals. They kind of went with the relief pitcher attitude, which I don't think we had seen in the NFL since some of you guys who might be old enough to remember George Blanda days. Remember he'd come in relief sometimes when it wasn't going good. So their situation was different. I would expect and hope that whoever we pick and is named the starter can play well enough and be the starter. Obviously, if the play doesn't back it up, we have a capable backup. And I'm not saying that to try and make whoever starts off nervous. That's just a fact of life in the NFL at all positions, So hopefully whoever we pick stays in there, plays good, and we're winning. If not, that's an option.
Vic, I know everybody wants to ask you about the quarterback battle, but I wanted to ask you about right tackle. First off, is Bobby Massey healthy? And then secondly, is it sort of a same timeline of you want to kind of watch these guys in preseason games, and how will you maybe determine who wins that battle?
Yeah, Massey's healthy. We've got Bobby, we've got Cam, and a guy not to go to sleep on is Calvin Anderson and even Quinn Bailey. So, you don't want to go to sleep on Calvin. He's part of that battle also. And, yeah, the sooner the better. But it's not quite as critical as the quarterback position as far as naming that guy. We work a lot of different combinations in practice anyway. But, yeah, we'd like to solidify it as early as we can.
Vic, back to the quarterback competition. You said to caution against, the groupings that they might be with. But how much more weight does it carry if whichever quarterback's in there is having success against most of your first-team defense and first-team secondary and, quote-unquote, dicing them up if they're having good days?
Yeah, it has some impact, but, the one thing that's different about practice is the quarterbacks know they're not getting hit. That's not the way it is in a game. So, and then I think you need to guard against a guy having a really good skelly period. That's really not football either. It's good practice. Those are teaching moments, teaching sessions, but it's not 11-on-11 football. 11-on-11 football in practice is valuable and good, but from the quarterback standpoint, he knows he's not going to get hit. He's not supposed to get hit. So you're missing an important ingredient there that, we've all seen quarterbacks that play better in games than they practice. They got that little it factor, that gamer to them, whatever you want, word or you want to use to describe it. So I do think the games are important, but the practices are also. So It's a long-winded answer to that question.
Coach, how you doing?
Good.
You
How was the golf
mentioned-
tournament?
It's good, thanks. You weren't there, so it could have been better. But you mentioned first team reps and how you value reps. Well, when it comes to the quarterback coach, volume of reps. I remember when Peyton Manning was here, he didn't want to give up reps to anybody. How important is that for a quarterback and his development? How important is that to name one earlier because of it?
Yeah, I think it's different for every quarterback based on their personality, their needs, their feel, their health. I know that Drew Brees the last few years never practiced on a Wednesday during the season, because of age and whatever. But you're right. There's a lot of quarterbacks that they want every rep. And once we decide who the quarterback is, we'd like to get it down to that too, to where it's 80-20, whatever we decide. But you're right. I mean, I know Peyton. I was with him a couple years. He wants to take every play. And, the quarterback position, truth be told, is probably the least strenuous physically position during practice. They don't run much. They drop back, they throw, they hand off. Maybe a bootleg or two where they're running. But they could probably take a lot of reps and not really feel it, compared to the other 21 positions. So, but you're right. And, I haven't been around Teddy enough to know that if he was the starter, if he feels he wants everyone or almost everyone. Drew's young enough to know that I know that he needs them. The more the better.
Hey, Vic, KJ Hamler, is he going to be ready and healthy to go for training camp? And what are your hopes, expectations for year 2 for him?
Yeah, he will be. A lot of hopes and a lot of expectations. We've got to do a good job of keeping him healthy. He's obviously had some soft tissue injuries. He reported to us last year with us prior to camp. Had one that nagged him some in camp. Had one in the off season. So, we need to have a special plan for him to get enough work and still keep him away from those soft tissue injuries. Very explosive, very quick, very fast. I think he's a guy that can make big plays for you. And once he does, I think he'll be a guy that the defenses has to deal with, and it opens up other avenues for your offense. But I personally have a lot of high expectations for him.
Vic, I'm over here. I am old enough to have covered George Blanda.
Yeah, you are. You are. You might be older than him, Warren.
I think he's dead.
He is.
I'm a little confused, but I am in my life.
A lot of people here will verify that, but go ahead.
Okay. Are you finished now?
If I stall you enough, we might not get around to your question.
Yeah. For the exhibition games, the preseason games, there's only 3, so you're approaching that differently. Normally, the last game is for those on the bubble, if you will, and you don't play anybody. How are you changing that, and how are you going to use those 2 quarterbacks? Would you say one will play one half, the other one the other half? Are you going to have Ripien playing more than both of them combined? I'm sure you've talked about it with your staff. Have you a plan in place for how you're going to handle the 3 preseason games?
We've discussed it. I've discussed it with other coaches around the league too, what their thoughts are on it. And I think you're going to see a variety of different responses from different teams where the third game will be the third game, just like you're used to seeing, because you don't have a game the next week. You got a bye week. So from that standpoint, it's still the same from a timing how the third game relates to the first regular season game. Others have said, no, they're going to play more of the second. I think the thing that will be interesting to watch for us will be, because we have a quarterback competition, that when you have either one of them out there, you want them out there with viable players with them so you can truly evaluate them. I can remember a couple years ago there was a young quarterback in the league. I won't name names, but they put him out there in the second half with the third team line, which wasn't very good for that particular team, and he got clobbered constantly, So how do you evaluate a guy like that then, So because of where we're at with the quarterback position, you may see the so-called ones and some of the twos playing more in the preseason to help us get a true evaluation of the quarterbacks. Defensively, it's different. You can mix and match defensive players to get 11 out there any which way, really. But for the quarterback to succeed, you need to have 10 guys out there with him that are viable NFL players. So I don't know that I've answered your question. It will be a fluid situation depending upon our decision, where it is at that time. So we haven't made a decision on game 3 yet, but I don't think it's as big a deal as it's made out to be from the point of view that it's still 2 weeks away from your first game. All right.